Hello Internet, and welcome to another tutorial video for Cataclysm Dark Days Ahead. Today we're going to be talking about breaking and entering, mostly because someone asked me to make the video and it seemed like an easy one to do. We're going to talk about all of the options that are available to you, or at least the ones I could think of: smashing windows, prying doors, lockpicking, cutting through metal bars, and really you could just drive a car through a wall if you really wanted to. But we're going to talk about these one at a time, so let's just kind of go through things individually. First up today is the difference between a felony and a misdemeanor. You don't always have to break and enter into a building. Sometimes that's not necessary. Sometimes you can just trespass. Many of the house locations in the game will have a window that has been left open that you can simply climb through. If you wander around the exterior of a building, you may well find an unlocked door or an open window, solving your need to break and enter. In fact, some building locations in the game are specifically left open so that the player has easy access to them. For example, there's a gun store layout that actually leaves a door open on the roof that you can use to access the building. Similarly, I made a gun store variant a few years ago that has a completely open front end. It's just barricaded with furniture. There are things like that in this game, and they're not super common, but you can find them nonetheless. Now, unfortunately, this does rely on luck. Most of the time, you're not going to find a building with a window open, and you're going to have to do a little bit more work in order to get inside. And your first option is my personal favorite, and it's also one of the easiest ones on this list. It's pretty simple. You walk up to a window, you hit the lowercase s key to smash, and you will select the window, which will break the glass. For most windows, this will leave a window frame, but it will still have broken glass in it, so you're going to have to smash it again to clear away that glass. If you don't do this, you'll be cut by the glass fragments as you climb through the window. And with that, you can simply climb through into the building. At that point, it's just a broken window frame, and most buildings in the game have pretty standard windows that can be smashed in this way. There are a few downsides to this, but it is my personal preferred method for entering basically every house in the game. It's the easiest way to do this. Smashing a window like this, it does make noise, right? The glass is breaking, and if there are enemies nearby, they will probably hear that and come towards you. The other main issue with this is that some buildings have an alarm, and they are triggered when you break the window. Now, as far as I know, there's no way to tell from in-game if a window has an alarm on it or not. You would have to look in the game files, and obviously that's not viable for the average player. So you're not going to know that there was an alarm on that window until it starts going off. Alarms are actually pretty problematic. They are quite loud, and that sound reaches a very, very long distance away from where you're standing. If you're out in the dark and you're doing a night raid or whatever, and you have an alarm go off, you should immediately leave the area. The sound will draw a lot of attention, and that includes pulling enemies from several blocks away. For example, if you break into a pharmacy's back room where they keep all of the medication, that will most certainly trigger an alarm. Gun stores also tend to be alarmed, especially on their windows, in addition to them being covered in metal bars. However, even a random house can have an alarm, although that is much more rare. And for houses, it's completely random on which doors or windows are alarmed. It's very annoying because you can't learn which are good or bad. For example, the front door might have an alarm on it, but the back door of the house might not have an alarm. Or maybe only one window on one side has an alarm, but the others don't. This is just because of it's completely random. Anyway, in addition to smashing through windows, you can smash through some doors in the game. It does depend on the bash value of your weapon and your player strength. You can check out my tutorial on smashing things if you like. I'll try to remember to link that video in the description. Some doors cannot be smashed due to their, let's call it durability. Some metal doors, for instance, are just completely impossible for you to smash. You will never have the strength or the weapon bash required to do damage to them. Now, the same is true for walls. Most of them are too durable for the player to get through. This is why windows should be your primary target. Anyway, smashing windows is low tech. It works for most buildings in the game, although it does tend to make a little noise, and it has the potential to make a lot of noise if an alarm goes off. But it's also very fast. It has no skill requirement and can be done with basically any weapon in the game. Moving along now, let's talk about prying open doors and prying open windows. So if you've watched old tutorials, you probably have seen someone recommend that you should make a makeshift crowbar as soon as you get into the game. That way you can pry open doors and you can pry open windows. Now, the principle behind this still exists, but the makeshift crowbar is no longer good enough for this purpose. You now need a tool with the prying 2 quality to open doors and windows. The makeshift crowbar now only has the prying 1 quality, so it can be used to pry crates, for example, but you can't actually use it to enter buildings. So you're going to need a proper crowbar instead, and making one yourself is very difficult for an early game character. Crowbars commonly appear on feral humans, that's probably the easiest place to obtain them in the game. Halligan tools are large and a little bit more unwieldy. They're not my favorite tool in the world, but you can commonly find them on firefighter zombies and in firehouse locations. To pry open a door or window, you will walk up to it, you'll press the lowercase a key to activate your tool, and then you will select your target. Now this does make a small amount of noise, but it's much less than smashing a window. Doors also allow for automatic prying. If you walk up to a door and you use the lowercase e key to examine it while you have an appropriate prying tool in your inventory, it will automatically attempt to pry it open. This does also work for windows, but if you try to use the open command, which is the O key, that does not trigger automatic prying. Anyway, this is pretty simple. Just remember that you need the Prying 2 quality. Prying 1 is not going to do it. There are some problems with this. It's possible that when you try to pry a window open, you might accidentally break it. This does not seem to be a very common occurrence. I could not actually get it to trigger in my testing. Additionally, prying a window seems to be instantaneous. It doesn't pass time as of this recording. That's probably not intended though, and hopefully that will change in the future. And I believe as well that prying something open can possibly trigger an alarm in the same way that smashing a window would, so you still have that as a possible threat to your character. Next up today, let's talk about lockpicking. Lockpicking in Cataclysm used to be very easy. You could craft makeshift lockpicks and get into pretty much any door in the game pretty easily. However, it is now heavily reliant on your device's skill and whether or not you have the lockpicking proficiency. Now you can spend a little time building up your character, getting those skills and that proficiency, but if you don't have them, then lockpicking is kind of a huge waste of time. First of all, you're going to need a lockpicking tool. The easiest to make are the improvised lockpicks and rudimentary lockpicks. They have different lockpicking qualities which do affect your ability to pick locks. One is better than the other. And you can attempt to pick a door's lock by using the lowercase a key to activate your pick and then select the door. Now lockpicking does take a long time. There will be a percent progress displayed at the top of the screen, and this is just your progress towards completing one lockpick action. It's not the progress towards success. If you have low skills and whatnot, you will fail pretty much every time, so even if that bar gets to 100, that's no guarantee that the door will open. And if you have no skills or proficiency, you could spend hours and hours and hours trying to pick a door and never get it open. Now unfortunately, we don't have any kind of lock complexity in the game. In other words, all the locks in the game are hard to pick, and I assume that you're manually picking them. So let's say that you find a locked bathroom door in the game, it's going to be picked the exact same way as a front door lock. However, obviously in real life, your front door lock is usually much more complex than something that you would have on your bathroom. Another thing to note about lockpicking is that it does damage your tools over time. When this happens, there will be a message printed in the log about you damaging your tool. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that lockpicking, it kind of sucks in this game, and it's really impractical because there are other ways to get into a building. Now, if you do get the proficiency and you have a high devices skill, it will be reliable in terms of success, but it still takes a long time. Even if your character is very skilled, it's still going to take you around 30 seconds to pick a lock. For all of these reasons, I do not find this to be a valid way of entering most buildings. The only real benefit of lockpicking is that it's basically silent. There is no noise generated, so it can be very beneficial when you're raiding at night. However, if you fail to pick a lock, it will still trigger an alarm, so there is still danger in terms of noise, just like there were with the other options. Anyway, since we're talking about noise, we might as well talk about some of the louder ways of getting into a building. So yeah, we have jackhammers in the game and we have pickaxes in the game, and you can use these tools to knock down a wall. In older versions of the game, you could even use these tools to break down a door or a window, but as far as I know, it no longer works that way. It only works on walls. You can mine something by using the lowercase a key to activate the tool. Pickaxes will take a long time to get through a wall, but jackhammers are much faster. We actually have two different types of jackhammers in the game. One is gas and one is electric. The gasoline jackhammer is, in my opinion, the best tool because it uses gas as fuel. The electric jackhammer does use electricity, which is obviously renewable. However, because of the massive power draw, the battery needs to be charged after every tile or two that you mine through, and that's really annoying. Regardless of what you're using, you will activate the tool, you will select the tile that you want to mine, and your character will set about their work. There will be a progress bar at the top of your screen displaying a percent, as we discussed previously. Now, as far as I know, there is no way for you to fail at mining. When the percent progress reaches 100, you will succeed. Depending on the wall, there may still be things in your way. For example, if you mine a concrete wall, it will leave a rebar cage behind. This rebar cage will block your path and you won't be able to progress through, so you're going to have to smash it in order to clear it out of the way. In older versions of the game, once you destroyed the rebar cage, it would leave behind a pit and you would have to place down a plank in order to cross safely. Now, I could not get this to happen on current versions. It's possible that that was fully removed or that it only works that way on certain walls. The time requirement for mining through a wall will be determined by the type of wall that you're mining as well as the tool that you're using. In general though, mining through a wall is very time consuming and it's pretty loud as well. Shockingly, jackhammers and pickaxes make quite a bit of noise. However, they are a reliable way to get through basically any wall in the game. So there will always be a use for these tools. Where a lockpick or a pry bar might not work for you, a jackhammer can take down most walls. Now, these mining tools, by the way, they can be a little bit difficult to come by. You can make a pickaxe yourself, but it's much easier just to shop around to local hardware stores. They don't appear in every layout, hence, they're a little bit rare, but once you find one, you've basically got a key to enter any building in the game. Jackhammers also appear at construction sites now, thanks to a very recent change to the game, and they seem to be a reliable place for finding those tools. The vast majority of places in the game are residential, and there's no real reason to tunnel through those walls to access them. However, there are some high-value locations in the game where having one of these mining tools makes it much easier to access them. For example, in some locations, there are doors that can only be opened if you hack a terminal, which can be very dangerous. So your only option in that situation is to hack the terminal, which requires a very high computer skill. You can cut through the door, which we're going to talk about in a moment, or you could simply pickaxe through the wall. And in those circumstances, having one of these mining tools is hugely beneficial. Anyway, as I said, we need to talk now about cutting through metal doors and bars. In many very secure locations, you will find metal doors, like I mentioned above. These cannot be accessed until you hack a nearby terminal. It's a lot easier to find tools in the game to circumvent this than it is to raise your computer skill to a point where you're guaranteed to succeed in hacking. Many of these doors can be cut open using an acetylene torch. There may be additional items in the game that let you do this, but I'm just not really familiar with them, and the one that I see all the time is the acetylene torch. There are also other metal doors in the game, such as those you would find on a gun store, which actually can be opened using lockpicks, but you can also cut through them with an acetylene torch. In the same way, a window that has metal bars on it can be cut using one of these torches. And alternatively, metal bars can also be cut using a hacksaw, although that takes much longer. Anyway, so in order to do this, you're going to need to find a few objects. First up is the acetylene torch itself. These are not exactly common, but you can find them in garages and similar locations. These torches do require welding tanks to use. Those can be found also in garages and steel mills, places that work with metal in some capacity. You will also require some form of glare protection. Basically, this is eyewear or a mask that provides you protection while you're welding or cutting metal. You can find some of these in those same exact locations like welding masks and welding goggles, or you can make some items of your own. You can check the HHG website for a list of garments that provide glare protection. That's the name of the quality that you're looking for. Most of the time, I just use the firefighter PBA mask. It's the one I seem to find all the time. It drops from firefighter zombies and in fire stations. You don't actually have to wear the item, it just has to be in your inventory at the time that you're trying to use it. Oh, and it doesn't matter if the item is filthy or clean, it can still be used for this purpose. As long as your torch is loaded with a welding tank and you have glare protection, you can press the lowercase a key to activate it and then select your target. Now again, this is only really used on metal doors and barred windows. I'm sure you could, probably torch through a wooden door in real life, but we don't have support for that. Plus, obviously you're probably going to end up starting a fire. Now hacksaws work the same way. Just activate your hacksaw and select your target. Hacksaws cannot be used to open doors. They are only for cutting through metal bars on windows. There are other tools in the game that have the metal sawing quality and can be used to cut metal bars, such as the firearm repair kit, and that works the exact same way. Using a hacksaw to cut through bars will take much longer than using a torch, and it also makes significantly more noise. However, a hacksaw does not require fuel or glare protection and are generally much more common than these acetylene torches. As far as I know, cutting metal bars will not trigger an alarm, but breaking the window afterwards will if there's an alarm on that tile. It's the same way for metal doors. I tested this several times and found that cutting through a metal door with a torch did not trigger an alarm. Now this does seem like a bug for me. I do expect that to change in the future. Because of that, I would recommend you be careful. You may end up triggering an alarm, which would be pretty bad for you. And then finally today, let's talk about the only other way I can think of for getting into buildings, which is to use some explosives. Most explosives in this game are not designed to destroy structures, and in fact, our structures are quite resilient. I did some testing previously using the most common explosives and seeing the impact that they had on buildings. Grenades are most likely the thing that you will find the most, and they unsurprisingly are not strong enough to take down a wall. Dynamite can destroy many low-tier walls, as can dynamite bombs, which they're basically player-crafted clusters of dynamite. C4 also reliably destroys pretty much any wall in the game last time that I checked, but C4 is not at all common, and you will most likely not see it in your playthrough. And then of course we have an item called a mini nuke, which is a incredibly large explosive that will full-on destroy a building. And in fact, it is too powerful. It will completely destroy a building and leave a big crater in the ground. And fun fact, turning a building into a crater sort of negates the purpose of gaining access to it because it no longer exists. As always, use extreme caution when you play with explosives in this game. Bomb fragments, also known as shrapnel, is incredibly dangerous and will kill you in a single turn if you do something wrong. You should definitely practice your throwing skill before you use any kind of throwable explosive, and remember that throw distance is affected by an item's weight. For example, a dynamite bomb or a mini nuke are too heavy to throw very far, so you're going to have to be very close to your target and immediately run away. I really do not recommend using explosives for looting. They are obviously very loud and they will draw a lot of enemies towards you in addition to all the damage that they cause to the structure. However, technically you can use them to break into buildings, so I had to mention it. And with that out of the way, I think I've exhausted all of my ideas for how to get into buildings. Obviously, like I said, you can literally just drive a car through the wall, but you're most likely going to hurt yourself, and it's not what I would recommend. Other than that though, hopefully this video was helpful. Maybe, you can click that like button and help me out if you enjoyed the video. I of course will be back with more tutorials in the near future, so thank you for watching and I'll see you next time.